Okay, so Matthew chapter 17, verses 19 and 21. I just want us to remember this. I'm going to have to read it from my phone here. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, "Why could we not cast it out?" Remember, they were trying to cast a demon out of a boy who the demon was causing him seizures. So Jesus said to them, "Because of your unbelief, for assuredly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. However, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting." So that's the verses that we wanted to just do a quick recap on so that we have the context for the next verses. This little seed of faith, it needs to be grounded in a real relationship with God. Notice that Jesus says, because of their faith, but then he also says that does not go out except by prayer and fasting, and that's that where we talked about a relationship with God. We discussed possibly the disciples were lacking in this area. We know they were not fasting because Jesus had already said previously that they did not fast. So maybe their small seed of faith wasn't growing quite as it should, and maybe their faith was somewhat shook by the things that Jesus has been telling them about going to Jerusalem, being betrayed, and dying. So, was there anything else on those verses anybody wanted to mention? Okay. All right. So let's see. This thing blacked out for a minute. I guess if I talk too long, it's going to cut off on me. That's okay. So if we look at the next verses 22 through 23, Matthew chapter 17, verses 22 through 23. So, okay. Now, while they were staying in Galilee, Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and the third day he will be raised up." And they were exceedingly sorrowful. So that's just the two verses I wanted us to look at, because this is what Jesus is telling them that I think this is really shaking them up at this point. Anyway, if you notice in verse 22, they're still in Galilee. I was going to show us on the map, but that's not possible this morning. If we look at question 8 in the workbook, which me and Addie were looking at earlier, what did Jesus predict for the second time to his disciples in these verses?
His death.
His death, right? His death and resurrection. And the workbook author and some other people, they try to count the number of times that Jesus tells the disciples. However, the problem is we're really only being told these times that are recorded that he told the disciples this. We're going to read some other verses that really imply that he was telling them this a lot. He was really trying to get it through to them. But we'll see that as we go. I just wanted to mention it. Now, how did the disciples react to this? Yes, Matt?
They were deeply grieved.
Right, they were deeply grieved. They were very sorrowful. They were very sad. And again, I think that can be affecting them in a lot of ways. So, let's see. They're not really believing or understanding the purpose of this, of course, at this time, and we're going to read and see that as well. And the idea of that betrayal there, let's see, is that mentioned in this or is it later? Okay, we'll see that later. So, no, it says betrayed here. So the Son of Man is about to be betrayed. So perhaps that idea of betrayal, too, is concerning to them in a lot of ways. And at this time, they don't know that it's one of them that's going to betray Jesus.
Well, the thing is, when you say, "I'm going to be betrayed," you think you're an enemy somewhere, someone, something against you, but someone in your inner circle,
That's
never consider.
That's hard to believe. It's kind of like if your family, somebody in your family that's really close to you does something like that, you would never expect it. You'd be just caught totally off guard, right? That's a normal thing for us. That would be really, really a lot to expect us to, we just wouldn't be looking for it. We'd be caught off guards. But of course, Jesus, we know he always knows what's going on. He knows what's going to happen. Eileen?
Well, I'm just curious about the language in this scripture. It says him, and he's regarding to himself. So I just was curious why that would be put that way. The Son of Man will be killed and betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him.
Right. Now, what Jesus is talking about.
He will be raised. So I know he's talking about himself, but the way he presents it, the way he words it.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, if it was me, you're right. I would say, well, they're going to kill me, and then I'll have this happen, right? But this may be a language thing, like being translated from Greek over to English. There's a number of different things that could be involved there. And he probably really spoke in Aramaic, right? So at least that's what people say. So the exact wording may be a little different too, but it's probably a language thing. Yes, Matt?
Well, it kind of goes to this motif where he often, I think the most often he refers to himself as the Son of Man. And so it's kind of like that's some guy, right? Like the Son of Man guy. He's not talking about himself, but he is talking about himself, right?
Yes, he is
So
talking
since
about
he's
himself.
talking about himself that way, then he has to say he. But of course, that's a reference to, I think, Daniel 7.
Yeah.
The Son of Man, one will come like the Son of Man, and he's basically God.
Right. The Son of Man reference is, and maybe that's why he uses that type of language too. It's a good point, because he is referring to the Son of Man, which is they've read about in the scriptures back in Daniel. So, and that is supposed to be the Messiah, this God figure, this God man coming. So maybe again, that's why he refers to that to himself in the third person as well. Since he's given himself that title, he's calling himself that Son of Man. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we look at Mark chapter 9, verses 30 through 32, that's Mark chapter 9, verses 30 through 32. Then they departed from there and passed through Galilee, and he did not want anyone to know it. For he taught his disciples and said to them, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and after he is killed, he will rise the third day. But they did not understand this saying and were afraid to ask him. So I want us to notice here in Mark that Mark says, the way Mark reads, it almost sounds like they've passed through the entirety of Galilee, but that's not really the case. They're passing through a portion of Galilee to get down to Capernaum. You remember they were further north up out of Israel, and they've done all this traveling down, and they just came off the mountain of the Transfiguration. So, but anyway, that's just the way that sounds. It's not really the way. That's not really the way I understand it. So anyway, another thing, you'll notice that he taught his disciples and said to them this same thing. He's telling them this. He's teaching them this, telling them to expect this. So that's why I say there's more times that he's telling them this. And you'll notice, well, what does it say about the disciples there? They did not.
They did not understand.
They did not understand and were afraid to ask, right? I always think the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. But we're going to read something else here in Luke. It's a little different for them. So I'm going to skip over the little map part, since I can't share that with you. So let's see. Then, oh, okay. I kind of ran on and talked about that. So let's move on to Luke, because I talked about that other stuff. So Luke chapter 9, verses 43 through 45. Luke chapter 9, verses 43 through 45. And they were all amazed at the majesty of God. Now this first part, that refers back to where he cast that demon out of that boy, okay? That's why I'm trying to keep our context flowing. It's a little difficult sometimes. But while everyone marveled at all the things which Jesus did, he said to his disciples, "Let these words sink down into your ears, for the Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men." But they did not understand this saying, and it was hidden from them, so that they did not perceive it, and they were afraid to ask him about this saying. So if we look at verse 43 of this, that, like I said, it pertains to the healing of the demon, healing of the boy, getting rid of the demon. Verse 44, what does Jesus mean? Let these words sink down into your ears.
Hear what I'm saying, understand what I'm saying.
Hear and understand what I'm saying. Now, we might say, get this through your thick head, right? That's the first thing that popped into my mind is he's saying, get this through your head. And he's not being mean. He just wants them to know this. He wants them to remember this. It's very important what he's telling them. It's always important, but especially this. He's warning them of what's to come. So now in verse 45, if you look at that, what's different there? Yes, Matt?
Instead of them merely not understanding, it almost seems like they're actively made to not understand. It's concealed from them.
It's hidden from them. It's concealed from them. Right. That was the thing that I noticed the most too. Besides the fact that they just didn't understand and they were afraid to ask about it, it's actually hidden from them. This is all part of God's plan. They weren't meant to totally understand at this time, but they would understand later. That may be hard for us to grasp in a way, but that's the way it was. That was part of God's plan. So let's see. But this is why we study all the Gospels and why we try to study the whole Bible, because there's little things here and there that you can get the whole picture. You can get everything together. Yes, Matt? And then
after his resurrection, he explained the scriptures and how they were all about him, and some of these things came back to their mind like, oh, he said all this stuff, and they understood it then later, but they didn't understand it as it happened.
Yeah, because that's right. When he's resurrected later, I think it's in Acts, right? That it says he opens the scriptures to them. He really explains everything to them. If it's not Acts, then it's at the end of Luke. But I was thinking it's in the first of Acts. But so yes, Addie, I'm sorry.
I forgot what it was. Some of the TV shows, and I don't watch very much of these, they usually, when they use scriptures like these that we've been through now, they'll say, see how it contradicts each other? That means it's really not true because it contradicts here. It isn't contradicting each of the, it is explaining more and more detail about each disciple or each apostle hears and understands, and he adds his words to it.
Right.
His understanding, I should say.
Yeah, it's just different people giving you, they're giving you an account of the same. We could all see a car wreck out here, and we would see different things depending on where we're standing, where we're at, all these, there's a lot of variables that go in. And it depends on how well you can see and how well you can hear, right? So, there's a number of things that go into how we would all talk about the same event happening. And that's why the Gospels, that's why we have more than one Gospel. It's important that we see all of these things and we put them together. Anything else? Okay. All right, so let's move on to back to Matthew, back to those verses. So if we look at verse 22, now while they were staying in Galilee, the word that's translated as staying also means like gathering or abiding. Remember, they just come off the Mount of the Transfiguration and they were gathering together there. And then Jesus told them this, reminded them this again, that he was going to be betrayed. Now we know from the next verses we're going to see that they're heading down to Capernaum. Let's see. So that's really, again with the, we're going to skip over the map thing. So was there anything else on those two verses? It's really pretty short, but I was trying to break things up good for us. All right. So if we look at the next few verses, Matthew chapter 17, verses 24 through 27. I might have to read this off my phone. It's a little small. When they had come to Capernaum, those who received the temple tax came to Peter and said, "Does your teacher not pay the temple tax?" He said, "Yes." And when he had come into the house, Jesus anticipated him, saying, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth take customs or taxes, from their sons or from strangers?" Peter said to him, "From strangers." Jesus said to him, "Then the sons are free. Nevertheless, lest we offend them, go to the sea and cast in a hook and take the fish that comes up first. And when you have opened its mouth, you will find a piece of money. Take that and give it to them for me and you." So we look at question 9 in the workbook. Did Jesus teach his disciples to pay taxes?
Yes.
Basically, yes, right? Basically, he did, and he even says, lest we offend them. So there's good reasons to do things, and he gives us one there. So how did he pay the tax? He had Peter draw up a fish, right, and had that coin there. Whether Jesus just created that on the fly or however he did that doesn't really matter. But there you go. He had Peter catch that fish, and they took the coin out and paid the tax for both of them. Now, let's see. Let me go forward here. So, was this a Roman tax? Did you have something, Matt?
It's the temple tax, right?
Right, it's the temple tax.
Exodus 30.
Yeah. See, it's the temple tax. It's not even a Roman tax. Okay? So it's a temple tax, and they call it, let's see, one name I saw for it was the double drachma tax, and it was supposed to be about 2 days' wages back in the days. And it was for the temple. It was for the upkeep of the temple. You know, it is similar in a way. We give an offering partly for the upkeep of things here, right? I mean, that's part of what our offering is for. So it's kind of similar to that. But now this was actual, they had changed it over from an offering to be a tax. But do you think this was a test or a trap?
Probably.
Seems like it was, don't it? I mean, here he just gets back into town and somebody shows up asking Peter, not even going to Jesus, but asking Peter about this. It just sounds suspicious to me. It sounds like a trap or a test. So maybe it's not, but it sounds that way. So, but this was actually established in Exodus chapter 30, like Matt was talking about. If you look at Exodus chapter 30, verses 11 through 13, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, when you take the census of the children of Israel for their number, then every man shall give a ransom for himself to the Lord when you number them, that there may be no plague among them when you number them. This is what everyone among those who are numbered shall give, half a shekel according to the shekel of the sanctuary. A shekel is 20 gerahs. I don't know about you, but that did not help me at all, 20 gerahs. But that's okay. We get the idea, right? The half shekel shall be an offering to the Lord. So it was an offering to the Lord that they were to give every year. So let's see. Did I have something? I do. Okay, so there's a few more verses here. Verses 14 through 16. Everyone included among those who are numbered from 20 years old and above shall give an offering to the Lord. The rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less than half a shekel, when you give an offering to the Lord to make atonement for yourselves. And you shall take the atonement money of the children of Israel, and shall appoint it for the service of the tabernacle of meeting, that it may be a memorial for the children of Israel before the Lord to make atonement for yourselves. So pretty straightforward offering of atonement, where they were giving to the Lord for this purpose. The money was intended for use of the tabernacle, or later the temple, of course. Yes, Pat?
I thought it was kind of interesting too that the writer is Matthew, and he was a Roman tax collector.
Yeah, he collected taxes for the Romans. That's true. That's a good point too, because then he writes of this tax. His mind would be about such things, though, wouldn't it? I mean, it would be something he would know about. So, yeah, that is interesting. So if we do go back to Matthew, we see here that even though Moses and God had called this an offering, we see here that it's now referred to as a tax. And is there a difference between an offering and a tax?
Yes.
I feel like there is.
Well,
Now,
tax is something that you have to pay because it's the mandate of you.
yes.
An offering is something you give out of your heart or because you want to give.
And that's the difference. And God wanted them to give this out of their heart, right? But here now, of course, through people being the way we are, I'm not trying to be totally mean, but let's face it, being just the way we are, it turns into a tax, and now it's something that's, like, it's going to be enforced, in some mean way or something. That's how it sounds. So just something to notice. Let's see. So, and also the offering reminds you of God's grace. That was the idea of the verses that he had there for us. Whereas the tax really does have that feeling of what some people will say, you're just being robbed, right? I've heard people say, well, the government's just robbing me, they're just taking money from me. But it's a tax. So. All right, so in verse 25 here, we're back in Matthew chapter 17, verses 24 through 27. In verse 25, what does Jesus seem to know? Well, he seems to know what just occurred with Peter, right? That some guy has approached him and asked him about the tax. And I think it's odd that Peter just straight up answered. Maybe it's not odd. Maybe he knows that Jesus always does everything correctly. So maybe that's okay. But he just automatically seems to answer yes. Yes, Jesus pays his taxes. So he's been with him, so I guess he would know. It just, at first glance, it kind of struck me as odd that he's answering for Jesus in that way. But then again, we see that basically he's right. Jesus does pay the tax. So, let's see. So, now if you look at the whole exchange between Jesus and Peter here, what does this exchange kind of imply? If you think about where Jesus is talking about who do they take taxes from, that sort of thing. Matt?
It's kind of like Jesus is going toward, hey, we're in the kingdom of God, like just jumping ahead to this stuff doesn't matter anymore because we're in the kingdom of God. But to keep the peace, we're going to play along and do it.
Right. We don't want to offend them, so we'll do it, right? But before then, he's like, who do you think they're taking taxes from? Is it from their son? Is it from their family? Or is it from strangers? And, Peter's like, well, of course it's from strangers, right? They don't tax themselves or their family. And, but he's saying, well, then the sons, Jesus says the sons are free, implying that the children of God are free of any such tax or anything like that. That was the implication he was making. And then, of course, he says, like we were talking about, lest we offend, we'll go ahead and pay it. Yes, Pat?
I think of the story about eating food offered to idols. And, Christians can do that. But
Right.
if it's going to offend somebody, they should not.
Yeah, it is similar to that in that Paul was talking about that, and he says, don't worry about, your food, where you're getting it from. You're not to participate in the idolatry, right? But the food that you're eating, it doesn't matter if it comes from something like that, unless, like you're saying, unless it would offend someone. If it would offend someone, then, stay away from it and don't offend your brother or your sister if they don't understand or something. Yes, Pat?
I thought it was interesting, too, that it was a fish because Peter was a fisherman.
It made sense because he is a fisherman, though he usually, I imagine he knew how to fish with a rod and stuff too, but he usually would have used a net on a boat, right? But in this case, it was just to catch that single fish, so it was a little different.
You probably never found a coin inside the fish you caught in the past.
I'm sorry.
You probably never caught a
Oh.
fish that had a coin in its mouth in the past.
I wouldn't think so. I don't know. I've never caught a fish with a coin in it. And I've not caught as many fish as he did, though, but I have caught a few. I've never caught anything like that, so. Yeah, that's that miracle. However Jesus did that, that's a miracle. That's just another little miracle he did. Let's see. And if you notice another thing that Jesus also kind of implies the dishonesty of taxing only strangers. Because really, to be fair, you should, if you're going to tax, you should tax everyone, right? But
I would think the temple tax would tax everyone.
well, my understanding was the temple tax taxed everyone, like he said, 20 years and above.
Yeah, but the way it's spoken up here is that when Jesus asked who do they pick? Who-
Well, Jesus made a comparison to kings in this case. He's kind of changing, he's using this example, but he's kind of also kind of making another reference. I'm sorry, Matt, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just gonna go down that trail with the kings, like, he's changing the subject here.
In a way.
You know how that works, but imagine there's a king and his sons.
Yeah.
In the kingdom, those sons aren't gonna be paying, they're gonna be sitting right hand of the throne or whatever, they're
Yeah.
not paying taxes, but the people are.
Right.
That's what he's trying to relate to.
And that's what he's really,
I say in my own clumsy way, but
No.
that's better.
He's kind of saying, Jesus and his apostles are like the sons.
yeah,
They're-
yeah. They weren't really, they shouldn't have really been beholden to pay anything like that. So, okay. So we talked about that. Okay, we talked about the offense, so that's good. We shouldn't purposefully offend others. We should try not to do that. So, okay, one funny thing. What's missing from this account?
Actually paying the tax at the end?
Well, right. We're never told that Peter actually does it, right? Now, we know he did. I'm just saying, Jesus tells him what to do, but he never says that, yes, he went and actually did all that. But we know he did. But I mean, it was just funny that that was not clearly just stated out there. And this is another miracle from God, from Jesus showing that he is God. Yes, Rachel?
I'm assuming that all the other disciples are traveling to Capernaum with them. Why are the others not supposed to pay the tax? Or
That's another good question. Why is this just for him and Peter?
yeah.
These other guys, they're probably, I'm sure they're all over 20. So maybe they're just having to make their own way or do it their own way. Maybe they just weren't around. Maybe nobody bothered them. I don't know. But yeah, they're not mentioned in this case.
Somebody bothers Peter here, right?
Yes, somebody comes and bothers Peter specifically. And you'll notice this isn't in the other Gospels. This is only, and it makes sense, Matthew, being a tax collector, he would have more of a mind for things like this. So, but that's the end of this chapter. Does anybody else have anything else on this or this chapter? Okay. All right, let me switch over here because I just brought it up. All right, so if we look at Matthew chapter 18, this chapter starts by stressing humility. And then it enters this main theme of sin or offenses and forgiveness. There are several parables in this chapter, and some things in this chapter are very challenging, but we'll look at those as we go. If you look at the points to ponder, I'll make that a little bigger for my eyes. The need for humility and concern for others in the kingdom, and dealing with a sinning brother and the importance of forgiveness. So those are some of the points we'll see here. Main points, I'll just go through the main points of the chapter. Who is the greatest? And that's where we get our lesson of humility. Warning of offenses, thinking football or something. But anyway, warning of offenses, the cost of sin, the parable of the lost sheep, when a brother sins against you, and the parable of the unforgiving servant. So that's going to be our main points in this chapter. And again, I'll just mention that we are in Capernaum at this point. I wanted to point that out on the map, but we'll just go on without that. So Matthew chapter 18, verse 1, I just want to look at the first verse by itself first. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who then is the greatest or is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Now, if we stop for a minute, I just want to look at Mark chapter 9, verses 33 through 35. Then he came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What was it you disputed among yourselves on the road?" But they kept silent, for on the road they had disputed among themselves who would be the greatest. And he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, If anyone desires to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all. So Mark gives us a little more information and what is the actual context of the disciples' question. Yes, Pat?
Just asking the question doesn't seem like they're very humble.
Right. That's probably the nail on the head, really, because that's what Jesus is going to get into. You know, they're really asking who among us is going to be the greatest. You know, which one of us is going to get the best position in the kingdom you're going to establish. So, how does Jesus tell them and us to be first? By being, well, here he says by being last and serving the others, right? But he is going to get into this childlike thing too. But to be last and servant of all here in Mark. Now, if we move to Luke, Luke chapter 9, verse 46, just very brief. Then a dispute arose among them as to which of them would be greatest. So, Luke mentions this, and then he skips down a little further than the other accounts. So we'll go back to Matthew for a minute and look at our verse. And after you look at the accounts, well, okay, that'll just have to do. After you look at the accounts, most likely, you know, what occurred was they were discussing this or maybe disputing a little bit on the road. And then Jesus asked them what they were discussing and kind of embarrassed them, and they probably shut up for a minute. And then, you know, maybe they were silent for just a time. But then, since they probably realized he already knew, they just went ahead and asked him, right? They just went ahead and asked him outright, you know, so who then is greatest? So now whether that's absolutely the order of events doesn't really matter, but that's kind of the way it seems. So what does this discussion and this question say about the disciples? They weren't, like Pat was saying, they weren't being very humble at this time, right? They were being human, if we think about it. They were looking for their own status or their own glory, their own reward. So they were looking for something for themselves. That was the problem there. And we see from the following verses that it's not just an innocent question, and Jesus really is going to correct them. They're going the opposite direction of the kingdom because they're looking for themselves. Yes, Pat?
I wonder why they were so concerned about that.
I'm not sure. That's why I say I think it's just a human nature thing. Oh, you know, part of it might be, sorry, it's just popped my head. They're guys, right? Now, a lot of guys are competitive. And they don't do it even in a mean way. Like me and my brothers and stuff, we would, be competitive with each other, right? So that's not unusual, as long as you're not doing it in a mean way. So to them, they may have this little friendly competition going in their minds. Because they're expecting, one thing too, they're expecting Jesus to bring about an actual physical kingdom. They don't understand yet that that's not what's going to happen. So they think, well, we're going to be set up as, maybe princes or governors or however you want to think of that. Yes,
Or
ma'am?
even like military generals.
Maybe.
They're planning ahead, well, we're going to have this war, and which of us do you want to be in charge of the army? And it's something practical like that.
Right. I want to be General Peter or something, something like that. That could very well be the case, that they're, because that's their understanding at this point. They don't truly understand that it's not going to be a physical kingdom and that they're not going to be that type of, have those type of positions like governors or generals or whatever. So that's part of what's going on here. And that's why I say they're going the opposite direction of the kingdom. They're going a more humanistic route because they don't fully understand. But they will, but they don't yet. So, and we have to remember that we need to deny ourselves, which again, they're looking out for themselves. So, let's see. Okay, I rambled on about some of this. So, yeah, they're wondering around, where do we sit in the pecking order? If you think about governments and how all the officials are established and everything, they're like, where are we? Am I going to be the vice president or whatever? That type of thing. So, That's why they're asking this question. They just don't understand what's going on yet. If we look at Jeremiah 45 verse 5, and I'll do this quickly. And do you seek great things for yourself? Do not seek them. For behold, I will bring adversity on all flesh, says the Lord. But I will give your life to you as a prize in all places wherever you go. So basically the idea is that, we should not be seeking this greatness, this glory, this status and position for ourselves. Did you have something, Pat?
No, it's just,
Oh, okay, that's okay. I thought maybe you had something. Okay. So, God is going to sustain our lives and take care of us wherever we are, wherever we go in our lives. So we want to keep that in mind and not worry about those human, earthly desires. So, all right. So let's see. All right, and that just, this is bringing us to the end here of just what I wanted us to look at in this first verse. The apostles, the disciples, they're human just like us, and they're at that point, they're learning and growing, and they're not there yet. We know that later, as we discussed earlier, that Jesus is going to open all the scriptures up to them, and then they will know and they will understand better. But that hasn't, of course, we haven't got to that point yet. So, does anybody have anything else on this before we end class this morning? Okay. All right. Thank you for your time and your attention.